Hey guys, RC here. Sorry, I had to restart the stream there. Didn't want anybody seeing my password to log into my team. So, all right, we have reached week 10 of the season, and bear with me here. I'm just trying to get my various devices open here. Always try to. All right, I know it'll take a couple of minutes to come up, but I know now that it just shows up. So basically, we ran week 9 last night. We are going to be in week 10, the upcoming sim on Tuesday. If you're tuning into this and have no idea what this is, we are the WWCF is an online league. We use the game Bullbound College Football. It's been out since 2005, and we are currently in our 26th season of existence with this league. And this is actually the third iteration of of leagues that a large number of us have been in using this game. So this, we've been probably a combined, oh gosh, I'd guess it's got to be close to 50 seasons or more, because we've got 26 here, and I know we were around the 20 season mark with Gridiron Glory, and I think we had to have had at least 10 seasons with Total Sports World while we were there. So this has been an endeavor for a good chunk of our lives for many of us. So anyway, that's what this is. And so a little more specifically is I am just doing a live stream radio broadcast for our league. So if you're not in the league, this probably won't mean a whole lot to you. We aren't talking about how to play the game or anything like that. But if you are looking for an online league, give us a look, because we are still cranking away, and we are still very much alive and kicking, and have a lot of quite a few open teams. Don't let that throw you though, because we also have quite a few owners. I think we've got, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere north of 50 if I had to guess, and somewhere south of 80. So somewhere between 50 and 80. But anyway, on to the show. So originally, Sean Murphy was going to join me this week. We had been talking about doing this, but Sean, congratulations, is out celebrating his 10th anniversary today. So kudos to him. And since we're speaking of anniversaries, in about 2 weeks, I just celebrated my 50th birthday last week, and I will be celebrating my 26th wedding anniversary in a couple of weeks. So, Sean and I share the same anniversary month, just a few years separating the old guy from the young guy. And I'll let you figure out which one of us is which. So we had been talking about doing this show rather than a recap of the previous weeks, which we can certainly delve into a little bit, but it was more to look ahead at the at what was projected in the future, as what we were kind of thinking about in the future. So here is the GDCS ratings. Most people are aware there are multiple ratings. We have the coaches poll, we have the media poll, the coaches poll, and then we have the GDCS and the computer and the RPI rankings. Well, just like in the old BCS, there were multiple levels, but the GDCS rating, and GDCS is Grey Dog Computer Service. Grey Dog is the company that made this game. This is the one that actually gives you the ranking for postseason. So right now you can see Texas Tech was number 1 last week. They have dropped to number 2. And that's the previous week here. So some big movers. Ole Miss jumped up. I'm sorry, not Ole Miss. Penn State jumped up from 13 to 9. Cal's up 1 from 12 to 11. North Texas moved from 32 into the top 25, and that'll probably be my only reference to them because Danny's gotten an ego about me talking so much about North Texas. So we'll cut that off right now. Bowling Green, Ball State all have moved into the shop. Virginia Tech moved up, as did Fresno State. A couple of my teams, Michigan and Texas, we are sitting at 13 and 14. Now, we have a 16-team playoff. So it is mostly conference winners and then a few at-large bids. So, what you're hoping for is either that you can win the conference championship from this level, or some of these teams lose here in the next few weeks and you don't, or that you can get enough of these guys win the guaranteed spot and the second team falls out. Now, an example here would be Maryland and Virginia Tech. Now, I don't know if they're going to play each other, but they're both in the ACC. Now, if Virginia Tech would win the conference title game, they get the automatic berth. Maryland, being number 1 right now, would fall, but would probably still be high enough to get an at-large bid. So that would be bad for teams like mine. So I would be rooting for Maryland to win, keeping Virginia Tech below me and giving me a chance to sneak in. Another example would be Ole Miss and Georgia. Your hope would be one of those two teams would win the SEC title. The other team hopefully would knock down behind you, and you could get an at-large over them. So it's hard to tell right now with basically 5 weeks left in the season, but that's what we're looking at. So right now you're looking at Maryland, Texas Tech, Rutgers, so Myro with 2 teams in there, USC, Ohio State, Alabama would be guaranteed teams. And then you would have, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, so the top 6 would be those conference champions. And then you would have, out of the other 10 teams, you would have other conference champions from the mid-majors and the low-end teams. So teams like Fresno State from Conference USA and Ball State from the MAC would be 2 teams that would, even though they're down lower, if they win their conference, get added into this playoff group. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's jump into the standings and just kind of see what we think is going to happen. Now, I logged in under my Michigan team, but that's because they're the first team to crop up on my login list. But we're going to go up to the ACC and start there. So we have Maryland is 7-0 on the season, 5-0 in conference. They have a half-game lead over Clemson in the loss column. Odds are they're going to go undefeated if we were guessing. And then right now there is a log jam of 4 teams at 4-2. And all of them have at least 2 losses overall, including Louisville, who has 4 losses and are barely a 500 team. So right now I think the odds-on favorite is Virginia Tech to somehow win that Coastal Division. Maryland advancing out of the Atlantic, and then Maryland taking out that champion. Division champ in the conference title game and getting the free pass into the playoffs again. If that happens, right now with 2 losses, it's going to be tough for any, 2 or more losses. I would say Virginia Tech and Miami are the only 2 teams from this half that have a shot to make the playoffs. But I think with 2 losses already to get in, they're going to have to win because a loss to Maryland gives them 3 losses going into the playoffs. And I think that would eliminate anybody out of the Coastal. So for a Coastal team to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win it all, which will include an upset over Maryland, possibly twice over Maryland if they're on the schedule. So right now, my call would be for Maryland and nobody else really, because even at Clemson at 5-1, they're still a 4-loss team overall. I don't see anybody else coming out of the ACC this year. The other thing would be is if say Virginia Tech or Miami do beat Maryland, I still think Maryland is that'll be their only loss on the season, and they would get an at-large bid if it goes that route. Rutgers running away with the North Division in the Big East, 8-0 on the season, unbeaten in conference play. Cincinnati, 7-2, 5-1 in the conference. So I think those are our 2 teams that will be dueling for the Big East title. Rutgers right now has only given up 99 points in 8 games. That's about half of what Cincinnati's allowed in 9 games. So right now I think Rutgers has to be the odds-on favorite. They've got wins over media teams, 2-0 against media-ranked top 25 teams, 6-0 in the conference. So I expect them to run the table. Cincinnati will probably win the rest of the way out, and those 2 will face off. If Cincinnati loses to Rutgers, I think a third loss knocks them out of any playoff picture. A win, assuming Rutgers has run the table, keeps Rutgers in the playoff picture as a 1-loss team with an at-large bid. So you could feasibly have 2 coming out of here. More than likely, it's only going to be 1, especially if Rutgers wins. I just think there's too many losses overall already. It's hard for a 2-loss team to get in, and it's almost impossible for a 3-loss team to get in. So that's where we're at there. Penn State, kind of surprising everyone here in the Big Ten over in the East. Michigan State has fallen on hard times, 500 this year. Ohio State doing what they do. Surprised they have a loss, but that was against Maryland in the season opener, I believe. Michigan 5-2. We did have the loss to Ohio State ourselves. I believe that's who it was to. Yeah, and but we've done well. We had Nebraska just gives us a tough time, boy. I tell you what, very tough time. So glad to have gotten past them, and that's a game that I always look at and go, man, I should dominate this game, and they just really have my number. They've played me tough for the last several years and have beaten me a couple of times. So I'm just glad to get out of there with a win. No way to catch Ohio State. They own the tiebreaker over me. So it's going to be Ohio State, and right now I'm going to say Penn State because they have a 2-game lead in the conference, and I think Ohio State handles them easily, getting the free pass. Now Penn State, that would only give them, let's say they run the table now, and we don't play Penn State the rest of the year, so they could run the table, lose to Ohio State, and still only be a 2-loss team on the season. I think that keeps Penn State in the mix. And right now they are number 9, up from number 13. So if they win out, they're going to continue to creep up in the polls. So I think that puts them in a great position to be an at-large team and take one of the at-large berths with 2 losses. And of course, if they do that, then that's going to make it really hard for Michigan, even if I can run the table the rest of the way, which is not a guarantee. I'm still sitting at 2 losses and really don't see any way I can catch them in the standings. Now a lot of that will come down to who we still have left to play, who they play. We did not play Penn State this year, so that's going to make it very difficult for Michigan. Now the fact that a couple of our other conferences that we looked at earlier probably will not have an at-large team, that could leave a gap for Michigan to sneak in with one of the last at-large spots, but it's going to be a long shot. All right, so moving on to the Big 12, Oklahoma. Unfortunately, we've had to put them on computer control. James has been AWOL for a little while. We have had, I want to say, 5 or 6 sims in a row without an export. We've had the sims have to be redone with hangups from issues with the Oklahoma lineup for both Darren and myself. So to alleviate that, we've just put them on computer control. They were being run by the computer anyway. First off, certainly hope James is okay. It's very unusual for people just to drop off the map like that. So we hope James is okay. We certainly also understand that real life comes up sometimes. He's just recently returned to the league, so hopefully, hopefully that's all this is that real life is cropped up and he can get back to us here. And Oklahoma will be waiting for him when he does. Yeah, that team that I'm not going to talk about, they're doing well. Of course, they won the Big 12 last year, didn't they? I think they did. Yeah, they got into the playoffs last year. I think they beat Texas Tech and got in that way as the champions. So they're right in the hunt. Texas Tech undefeated, and Texas sitting with 2 losses. Tech's probably going to run the table. Oklahoma and North Texas, honestly, Danny has not exported very much this season either. He's getting married coming up soon, had a baby during the course of this season. So he's had a lot going on in real life. So that one could be interesting. In fact, let's see, North. Well, let's go to Oklahoma then. Oklahoma. All right, so Oklahoma beat North Texas. So even if Oklahoma loses another game, they finish tied. And unless it turns out to be a 3-way tie with Boise State or somebody coming up and tying them, Oklahoma probably wins the North with the tiebreaker. Texas Tech, they've played really well. Only 90 points given up in 6 conference games. Oklahoma has 9 points left to go in one game to match that. I think Texas Tech is going to take the Big 12 this year. Of course, there's so much talent in a lot of these teams at the top of this conference. It used to be the Big 3, and we were in the Big 12 was in the mix every year basically. And it's not that the teams have gotten worse, it's just other teams have gotten just as good. And I think our conference here in the Big 12 has really become an afterthought. I don't think people think about us very much anymore. And that can be dangerous. But I think Oklahoma, Texas Tech are going to face off. I think Texas Tech wins that, gets back to the playoffs this year with possibly an undefeated record. Now, what does that leave for the rest of us? Well, if Oklahoma can run the table and then only lose the conference title game, that gives them 2 losses, so they could be looking at an at-large bid. North Texas could run the table and finish as a 2-loss team. Texas could run the table and finish as a 2-loss team. So you would potentially have 3 teams in here that could be trying to get one of the at-large berths this year. And at that point, it's going to come down to just who gets it. I think if we look at this, Texas is 14, Oklahoma's 18. Now, they were not ranked in the coaches poll, I think, but they were 23rd. So if they all run the table, odds are Texas is still going to be above them in the poll, possibly. And then North Texas just cracked the top 25. So again, uh, that leads to right now, at least, Texas having the tiebreaker. Not a tiebreaker really, but top advantage in that selection process. But I think there's going to be four teams looking for a couple of spots in the playoff hunt this year. So a lot of action still coming out of the Big 12 this year. Conference USA, this is one of our two core mid-major programs. A lot of discussion, and I may pull that up just to kind of illuminate on that a little bit at the end, depending on how long the video goes. But we've got Bowling Green 8-1 on the season. Fresno State undefeated on the season, so they're doing really well. Rice is a two-loss team, but undefeated in the conference. And then you also have Navy sitting with one loss in the conference. So I'm not going to go into all the schedules right now. I mean, like I did. I mean, just the Big 12 because I know because I'm in that conference. But over here, right now I would say Bowling Green is going to be the easy choice. If they still play each other, Navy could certainly get past them, and even with a worse overall record, win the conference. That would not be the first time that's happened. Fresno State and Rice, that could come down to a head-to-head matchup if they have not, if they play this year, because obviously they have not played yet with 2 games left in the conference slate. That would be interesting for that to go head-to-head. And again, you could have a team with a worse record overall win the division just based on that. So Fresno State, probably not ranked high enough. We saw them in the GDCS poll. Probably not ranked high enough to get in. Even Bowling Green. As a mid-major, basically you have to win the conference. If you don't win the conference, it's tough to go to the playoffs. You may get a really good bowl game, but as far as a playoff berth, very, very difficult. Yep. Unfortunately, nobody has shown up yet. I'm looking for questions, but hopefully this is the first year I'm doing this and just starting to stream on Twitch for this. So hopefully people start showing up at some point, and or let me know that there's no interest, and I can find something else to do with my time other than doing this, which I don't mind. It's just you certainly want to make sure people are getting something out of it. Moving down to the other mid-major, the MAC. You've got Buffalo 6-3, but 5-1 in the conference. Duke has a shot there, even though they're only a 500 team, 4-1 in the conference. Ball State kind of running away with it there, 2-game lead on an 8-game win streak. I think they're going to probably come out of the West. Buffalo and Duke, hard to tell. I don't know if they've played each other yet, but that would be a deciding factor. But I look for Ball State to come out of here, and again, that would give them the automatic berth into the playoff race, probably leaving the other team out. Now, here's where it gets interesting, especially for teams like Texas and Michigan that, are going to need an at-large bid. These are the conferences that I really keep an eye on, because let's say Ball State goes in undefeated into that conference championship game and then loses. Well, your hope is that, hey, they've got one loss, and they're a mid-major, that keeps them down behind you in the polls. But if they are undefeated at that point of the season, they may not be. They may be above you. And how far down does that loss in a title game drop them? Then you have a team that, a 3 or 4 or 5 loss team overall, making the postseason, the playoffs as a conference champ, and then that's where it opens the door for a Ball State to sneak in and grab an at-large, taking that away from one of the Power 5 schools. Not that that's a bad thing, just as, I'm just speaking personally. That's, where I start looking at, that's something I have to be concerned about, because let's see, right now we have 1, 2, 4, 6, 8. So we have 10 conference champs, 6 at large. So, what you're trying to avoid is any of these mid majors or lower major teams coming up and stealing one of those, quote unquote, stealing one of those spots. Naturally, it's good for the conference, but, what does that do for, for everybody else? All right, moving on to the Mountain West. Air Force is 5-0, 6-1 on the season. Washington State demoted from the Pac-12. They are in second place. Only a game back here, so I don't remember if we've played. I think we have. We just beat Idaho. We've beaten Wyoming, so we put them down a little bit. We being Air Force, that's one of my teams. New Mexico and Nevada on the other side. UTEP's right there as well. My gut is going to tell me Nevada. New Mexico could get in there. I think New Mexico is it New Mexico or state that is computer run? I don't remember. I think I don't remember all the ownership stuff now, but right now it looks like yeah, I don't know. My gut's going to tell me Nevada just because they always seem to come out of it. They're who I consider my rival because that's who I usually end up playing. But certainly, New Mexico winning the West Division would not be a stunner. So, this is another example with 3 and 4 losses down here. Either Air Force or Washington State, whoever comes out of the East here, should win the conference title. And get the automatic berth, and no chance for any of these other teams just due to the sheer losses. Air Force also does not rank high enough, nor does Washington State. If there is an upset of sorts in the conference title game where New Mexico or Nevada or even UTEP get in, then Air Force and Washington will be relegated to a bowl game just because of the prestige level not being high enough in the polls to garner an at-large berth. So it's an all or nothing here. Over in the Pac-12, Cal, every year he sandbags and says he's going to suck, and every year he's basically right here at the top. Oregon has come up and is pushing him, but I think Cal is the class of the North Division. SC undefeated in the South, certainly the class down there. So I think we're headed for yet another USC Cal title game. Oregon could get in there, and that would not be a stunner. Anybody else, I think, would be, however. I think that would be a surprise. So I'm looking for one of those, and then, of course, they're both either undefeated or one loss. So much like the Big 12, you've got Cal or Oregon are going to miss the title game and probably be a one-loss team without a conference title game to worry about, sitting right there trying to get an at-large bid. And this is kind of the little loophole that I look at, because let's say these guys run the table the rest of the way and that they don't play each other, because I don't know if they have yet. So Cal ends up 8-0, 11-1. Oregon ends up 7-1, 11-1. And one of them, Cal, would go to the conference title game. Oregon stays home with basically the same record. Cal's got to worry about losing and falling in the polls. Oregon doesn't have to really worry about that. they could actually move up in the polls depending on who above them might lose in the conference championship week. Same thing with USC. They've got to worry about, if we lose, do we fall behind Oregon? Do we stay in front of Oregon? So sometimes making the conference title game, even though it gives you the chance for an automatic berth, it can really screw with you looking for an at-large berth by losing that championship conference title game. So I've noticed that over the years between Oklahoma and Texas when we were in the South Division. This was before Myrle came up with Texas Tech and really developed them. And it was, Oklahoma and Texas every year coming out of the South, and one of us would go to the conference game and the other one would have to stay home, and usually we'd both end up in the playoffs. But I finally kind of realized, man, it's almost better to not to finish second in the division with the second best record and still get into the playoffs without having to play that extra game and risk losing and injuries and everything else. Now, on the flip side of that argument is then you don't control your own destiny, and my teams have not made the playoffs the last couple of years, so I'm in the middle of one of my longest droughts of not even making the playoffs with my core team or teams. So so anyway, Cal, Oregon, that's going to be a shootout probably to the end of the season. SC will be there, and I don't even know if I could call that one. I'd have to sit down and look at rosters and everything else, but that's going to be a 3-horse race coming out of the Pac-12. And again, that leaves 2 teams looking for one of those 6 at-large berths. The Southeastern Conference, one of our other Power Fives, we've got Georgia with a half-game lead in the win column, and then Alabama with a half-game lead in the win column over Ole Miss. You've got a couple of 2-loss teams, all jumbled up here. I mean, Florida and Kentucky as well are only a game back in the win column from Georgia. So, and none of these teams are really stellar. Florida with 2 losses at this point really is surprising. You don't expect that from Harry's club. So I'd be curious for Harry to kind of give us some insight as to what's going on. Is this inexperience? Is this a lot of young players? Has there just been some really tough losses? Because that is the first thing that stands out, is that Florida's not 4-1 or 5-0 in the conference. So that jumps out. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we've got 4 teams that are going to be down to probably the wire here for the East title. And Ole Miss always right there. Alabama, even Auburn's right there. So I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if Alabama and Auburn come down to that game, assuming they play at the end of the season? I don't know. So that conference is just completely wide open. Just on sheer records, you've got to say the champ's going to come out of the West, either Alabama or Ole Miss. Look at the defense by Ole Miss. Only 83 points allowed in 7 games. Now, a lot of these teams have played 8, so hard to kind of make apples to apples comparisons. But they can give up 41 points and still be better than Alabama's defense from a scoring perspective. So the SEC is going to be interesting. Now, on the flip side, you already have all but 2 of these teams with 2 or more losses. So you're going to have Alabama or Ole Miss coming into the conference title game and then possibly losing and finishing with 2 losses. And this is what I was just talking about a minute ago. Then you could have Alabama lose and have a second loss where Ole Miss doesn't even play in the conference title game and still has only 1 loss. And that could give them the edge, even though they didn't, finish ahead of Alabama in their own division. So, this is where kind of some real life stuff starts to crop its head, this will be interesting. I don't see a big chance for multiple teams coming out of here into the playoffs just due to the sheer number of losses. A third loss pretty much automatically disqualifies you. So, let's say Alabama and Georgia take on each other for the SEC title. A Georgia loss puts them at 3 losses, even if they run the table up to their conference title game, and that certainly pretty much eliminates them from any playoff berth, relegating them to a bowl game. So you may only have one team coming out of the SEC with the automatic berth, and then maybe, just maybe, one team. So coming, looking for an at-large. So again, just only speaking personally for my teams, Michigan and Texas, that actually is encouraging because it means possibly less teams that I'm dealing with trying to snag one of those last spots. The Sun Belt, the last conference to look at here. Middle Tennessee 5-2 but undefeated, and Louisiana Monroe 5-3, 4-2. SMU also 4-2, and Southern Miss 4-1. This one is looking tight. We're going to say Middle Tennessee. Wow, that's just. I'm going to say Louisiana Monroe, and you're going to have the winner that gets in. Everybody else is going to be relegated to bowl games if they qualify. Middle Tennessee's got 5 games, and they have 3 conference games left. They should get to 6 wins. Louisiana Monroe should get to 6 wins with 2 more conference games left. Southern Methodist is going to have to win both of their conference games to get to 6, and I don't think anybody else is going to make it. So, you're talking about most of these teams probably not even qualifying for bowl games. So anyway, that's kind of the outlook here right now. Still very jumbled. Of course, that always tends to sort itself out in the last week or two. I want to pop into our forum here for a second because there was a discussion, and let me see if I can find it. I think this is it here. All right. Boy, I hope Darren doesn't get mad because this is in the conference committee, but this is the proposal for next season. So just, some of the teams we've talked about. So Bowling Green doing very well in their mid-major, getting bumped up to the Big East next year, possibly. Navy doing pretty well, getting added up to the ACC. Kent State's been a team on the cusp of getting promoted for probably 10 years, looking to maybe add them to the Big 12. Big 10, Rice possibly to the Big 12. Conference USA is one of our feeder leagues into the Power 5. So your teams from the Power 5 that get demoted will either go to Conference USA or the MAC or Mountain West. I don't remember which one of those two. Maybe the Mountain West. So Conference USA, you can see a lot of teams coming in there now. So we're looking at UCLA, BYU, Air Force, Kansas, Ball State, Northwestern, NC State. And that's where a lot of these teams are coming from that are moving up. Rice, Kent State, Bowling Green, Navy. And then Air Force getting promoted from the Mountain West, demoting Iowa State down there. And then Fresno State, San Diego State getting moved in. So, there's a lot of teams that are potentially being moved. And the reason for that is, if we look at the prestige charts by conference, what the whole idea of moving teams is to try to keep some competitive balance. So, like you look at NC State, they've got a 36. Well, let's go to the end here, I guess. probably need to put a break in somewhere right here and put the team initials or something. But you can see they've got a 37 prestige. I mean, they're almost 30 points behind, the bulk of the teams here. Be careful. You know, I mean, they're still about 15 points behind even the next group of teams. Uh, you've got a few more teams in the 40s down here, but at least they can fight it out here. When you're the only team, that makes you the cupcake game, and that's what's difficult. So, it would be good to move this down and move a team that's, say, maybe in the low 60s up into here, to where you've got, 4 or 5 teams. Yes, they're not going to compete with Florida State or Maryland. I'm sorry. They're not going to compete with Maryland. But if you put a team that's somewhere in that 58 to 65 range, now all of a sudden, these other, all 5 of those teams have a chance to fight for second place, at least, behind Maryland. That's why, you're not going to see as big a decision to move these teams out, because, you've still got 3 of them that can contend with each other and go 3-5 in the conference possibly. And sometimes as a lower tier team, that's the best you can do. And if you schedule smart and go 3-5 in your conference, then you can go 3-1 outside of your conference if you schedule smart, and get to a bowl eligibility. And that's where you're going to see the ability to improve your prestige. So I think that's why you're looking at a lot of teams like that. Here we are in Conference USA. A lot of teams like Bowling Green we've talked about. So you can see, in the last 15 years, they've gone from a 38 to a 58. So they're one of the top teams up here. Who's oh, that ain't what I wanted to do. Air Force. So Air Force started as a 45 prestige team. When I took them over, they were in the 30s. It was somewhere in this area here, 38 or 36. And we've slowly grown them up, and now, over the last couple of years, I mean, we went from a 38 to a 46. That was the year that we first went undefeated and didn't lose our first game, and we were 11-1, I think, won the conference title. Got blown out in the first round of the playoffs, of course, but you can see we got an 8-point bump that year, and then we bumped up 6 points in the last 3 years. So it can be done, and that's and then you look, they've gone from being third or fourth or fifth best prestige in their division to being 10 to 15 points higher than anybody else in the division. So it can happen pretty quickly. It doesn't always. But anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at, is some of those discussions for movement. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and throw it out here. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Again, always, if you're not seeing this live, which well, it looks like we have one person in here. I don't know who it is. Hi, whoever's dropped in here. Leave comments when I post it up on my YouTube channel. Leave comments on the, of course, on the forums more than anywhere else, because that's where we all gather anyway. But put your thoughts out there about what you're thinking, and let me know what you think about these radio shows. Do you like them? Are they a waste of time? Do they not hit on the things that you think we need to be covering? And we can always adjust that as well. I was just trying to do some things to add some depth to the league. So anyway, thanks for showing up, whoever showed up, because I see I have another viewer in the room with me, and the rest of you that check this out later. Appreciate you listening, and good luck to all the teams the rest of the way. Not too much luck, because I need a bunch of you guys to lose for my teams to get into the playoffs, because I am due for a national title. It won't be this year, I can guarantee that, though. I need to be able to recruit a quarterback first. So thanks for checking us out, and we'll see you. Take care.